So I once again had the pleasure of sitting down with Greg from King of Nerds to talk about the latest prototypes revealed recently by Meta. Now what you're seeing here is a snippet of the live stream. For the full live stream, head on over to King of Nerds, where we do a live stream chatting about everything VR, 10 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time every week. Now beyond that, the King of Nerds channel is fantastic. Greg puts so much time and effort into every video he makes. If you love VR, it's well worth checking out his content, and you might also want to consider subscribing. So now onto the part of the live stream where we chat about those Meta prototypes.
Meta prototypes. So you and I have not had too much of an opportunity to go into prototypes and all of these. So Addie Roberts with The Verge, I like her a lot. She's been covering VR for The Verge for a number of years, and she had a pretty good take on it and a pretty good breakdown. Her breakdown was essentially there are 4 prototypes, and they have code names. Code names are Butterscotch, Starburst, Hollow Cake 2, and Mirror Lake. Mm-hmm. So Butterscotch it's essentially a Quest 2 with a high resolution screen. You can read the bottom line of an eye chart on it, which I don't think is particularly new. I mean, I remember people doing this on PCVR, like the Vive, the Index. There were different tests. I forget what the name of the application was, but there was a utility you could get where you could stand there and look at an eye chart. You know, it worked really well. So this isn't anything new, and it apparently has a huge field of view where it fills up your entire vision, which I've not had. Have you tried any of the extremely like the Pimax, the wide vision VR headsets?
I haven't, no.
It was great. So I was one of the people that signed up for the original 8K, and then I chose to go for the 5K, and I'm glad I did. I have not tried the 8K. I don't think the 8K is that much better than the 5K. At least people were reporting as much, but it is extremely wide. In a game where you have a bow and arrow, so you've got the bow. If you hold the bow parallel to the ground, you know, a bow probably in these old, you know, the games that are supposed to simulate like an old school bow, it's probably like 4 feet or so. It's pretty long. In a standard Vive, Index, anything like that, or in a Quest, you can't see the tips of the bow if you hold it parallel to the ground. But on the Pimax, you could see that and then like another foot in your vision. And I wouldn't say it was your full peripheral, but it was pretty darn close. It was so wide, in fact, that you realize that a lot of the things that are around you disappear when you're not looking at them. And then when you turn back, they reappear in order to save on processing speed. So you would just be standing there and you just kind of like, you know, move slightly as you do as a human. And all of a sudden a tree would appear next to you and then disappear, because in a regular field of view, you wouldn't see it whatsoever. It's fantastic. I think it's what we need. I'm looking forward to that. But I don't think it's going to be here in the Quests. At least it's not going to be in the Quest until next year or the year after that. The other Starburst, it's an HDR VR system. So like HDR, just like, you know, what you're going to see on a television or a phone or any device where there's just a large color gamut. According to them, they're saying it's the first HDR VR system. And in the conversation with Mark Zuckerberg, he was saying that in order to achieve this, you have to have a large amount of backlight. And, you know, what's being said is that, you know, this must be hard because these aren't coming out right now. And Zuckerberg is saying, we're working hard to try to find a display that can do this much backlight. I think what they mean when they say that is that they're trying to hard to find a display that does this much backlight at a consumer price. Because I think they can already do it. And according to him, it's orders of magnitude brighter, up to 20,000 nits. So, you know, what is your thought on something like this, HDR? Like, what's been your experience with HDR in the televisions versus what you think the effect could be in VR?
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, televisions can go, I think it's like 10,000 nits or so. You know, they can go quite bright when compared to VR headsets. And I think it's hard to, it's one of those things, it's hard to hard to say until you've experienced it. I do know that when I watched the video from Tested, that when viewing these things, testing these headsets, they said some of it's hard to go back to regular VR after trying them out.
Sure.
And I think you're right in the sense that a lot of these things, because they are prototypes, they're not like they're not consumer level at the moment. So I'll give you an example. We've got, for example, the hollow cake, which we'll talk a bit more about later. But I know the hollow cake. It's the one on the end of that table that we're going to see a bit later on the video. But the hollow cake, and we've seen Bosworth wearing the hollow cake before, but that uses really thin lenses, and you'll be able to see on the headset that it's not the same as a regular headset where you got a lens and then a display projecting on those lenses. The holocake, what it does, it uses these really thin holograph lenses, if you like, and these specialized lasers, right? So these specialized lasers allow beam through these lenses and essentially allow us to have a VR experience, but with a much thinner headset. Now, the problem is these lasers, they're not consumer ready. There's nothing on the market that makes them viable. They're too costly, they're unsafe, and they're just, right now, they're not viable as a consumer product. So I think you're right with a lot of these concepts, a lot of these concept headsets, that they're fantastic. They've got some really good ideas there,
Right.
but in terms of bringing them to market, well, there's no real fully functioning headset that's been built yet from these concepts. And so while they're promising, I think they've got to find viable ways of bringing them to the market because it's just not there yet.
Yeah, so I was taking a look at these, and I'll switch over here to the web. I just think they look freaking cool, man. And the weight savings, just because of the light refracting back and forth, it's going to be immense. I just think it looks fantastic.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people, they don't want to wear a headset. I've heard complaints before. It just looks heavy. And I get it. And I don't blame them. And, it's just like photography. People, as soon as smartphones became convenient, that's when people started getting more into photography. It was all about just the convenience, So
that's right. I think that's a massive barrier to people using it, especially for work.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do, and there's a report out showing that most people as well wearing VR headsets for work is uncomfortable. People don't want to do it, and I understand that. And this is the step towards as well that future where we might be wearing VR headsets more for work purposes. I just don't think we're quite there yet. But these kind of headsets, and I'll just put it out there that it's not standalone headset. So that headset we just saw, the Holocake, it's not standalone. It runs any PC VR title, but it isn't standalone too. So that's going to help it thinner with its form factor, make it thinner and give it a slimmer form factor.
On that tested video with Norm, Zuckerberg addressed that. He was saying that they care more about the visuals than they do the processing and in this scenario. So they're going to do things in layers. And then once they get the visuals looking good, maybe by then the processor will be good enough that they won't have to do anything. But if not, then they'll start working on the processor to get it up to snuff. And that's something I wanted to talk to you about. What are your feelings on realistic VR? You're talking about VR that looks photorealistic. I'm surprised that I'm saying this, but I don't think I need it, although I do want it. What are your feelings on it?
That's the one. So the prototype we saw in that video is trying to pass that Turing test. So the Turing test is making things look as realistic as possible. And what they've achieved so far, now to get it fidelity looking as close to realistic, you need 60 pixels per degree. What they've achieved so far is 55 pixels per degree. So they're getting there in terms of that realism looking kind of thing. But to achieve that, I think they really had to also shrink the field of view too. Yeah. So, there's it's not like you're getting the same field of view as you would with the Quest 2. I think they had to shrink it to half that of the Quest 2 in order to achieve that 55 pixels. So again, like I say, these are concepts and we're not quite there yet. But anything that's going to make my experience more realistic and immersive is something I want.
Yeah, for
And so,
sure.
Tural test all the way. I'm really for that. I want them to achieve that as soon as possible, because I think as soon as I experience as realistic looking visuals, I'm not going to be able to go back. It's going to be hard to actually go back to, like, than these other headsets. And I did have a question, because you mentioned earlier you tried the Pimax, right? And so it
Right.
had a wider field of view. Now, none of these prototypes that we saw Zuckerberg showing off, none of them were working on making that a massive field of view, making it a lot wider than it is previously, from what I
The the
understand.
the butterscotch
Right.
is supposed to have a high resolution screen with a huge field of view. It's your entire field of vision, which is more than I got on the Pimax. The Pimax was
Right.
almost my entire field of vision, but not entirely.
So, so this is my question on that, because that can be a bit of a blessing and a curse, right? Because
Sure.
obviously you want a greater field of view, more realistic, more immersive,
Sure.
and all that kind of stuff. But motion sickness. I don't know if you suffer from motion sickness,
I do.
but
Yeah.
one of the advantages of having that sort of locked into that tight field of view, um, would be that you don't suffer from motion sickness to the extent that you would if it
Right.
filled up your whole field of vision. Now, did you find more motion sickness when using the Pimax compared to something, say, like the Quest?
I got the Pimax right when it came out. Within, I was one of the first people to get it within the first 3 months that they started releasing it. And I had so much trouble with it, and there was so much distortion that it became more headache inducing than vomit inducing. But I can honestly tell you that I never got motion sick with that wide of a display. But it does make sense that a smaller display is going to cut down on motion sickness, because that's exactly what we see. Because they always, crop it down to just like a small circle until you stop moving and then bring it back out. But now that you say it, it's very surprising. But another thing about the Pimax, which you may not be considering, is it's not just wider, it's also taller. I felt like I had way more vision above and below. So maybe it's not just the horizon and the left to right, because I think it's the left to right that makes you sick, not the up and down. I had so much
Mm.
more up and down, so much more sky and so much ground beneath me, that maybe it all kind of balanced out.
Is it hard to go to something like the Quest after trying the Pimax?
If I used
Do you feel
nothing
spoiled?
but the Pimax for quite a while, yes, it would bother me. However, this goes back to the point I was making about like photography and smartphones and how a lot of people became photographers because it was so much more convenient. The Quest is so convenient, including the Quest 1. It was so convenient that I basically hardly even used my PCVR, which I cannot believe I'm saying that, because I have a Vive Pro, Pimax, I have an Index. I love it. Rift, CV1. I love PCVR, but at this point, $300 gets me. I can stand anywhere I want in my house. I don't have to go down to a room where I have my lighthouses set up. And now that I can play PCVR wirelessly, and I know a lot of people say that they don't experience a perfect experience through the Quest 2 doing like PCVR. I do. I don't know. Maybe I'm just lucky. There's not, a lot of people here. There's just me and the dog. So there's not a lot of people that are using up the bandwidth, right? But I
Yeah.
basically have a flawless experience doing wireless PCVR over the Quest, and I primarily use Virtual Desktop for that. I don't use AirLink. Yeah. So are you looking forward to that wider experience, and are you afraid that it's just going to make you sick, that you're going to have to give up VR?
Oh, look, I think that's something they're going to have to keep in mind when they're developing greater field of views. They can't do one without the other,
Right.
unless they want to really um, make people's experiences, their first experience of potentially a VR, a bad one.
Right.
They're going to have to develop both in conjunction. And this is just an assumption, but I'd assume both things would advance along with each other. So they would advance ways of reducing motion sickness at the same time they're increasing field of view, because that's going to be a problem. So I'm not too worried that increasing field of view would also make me more motion sick. Also, I feel like I've trained myself to become less motion sick. I could barely play for 5 minutes when I first started with VR. Now I
Really?
can play for hours, and yeah.
Were you one of those people that just standing there you got sick? without moving?
No, no. So to be clear, is those games where, like, for example, the port of Quake, Dr. Beast's port of Quake
Oh
on
God,
Quest.
yeah, yeah. I'm not going to be doing
Yeah,
that,
like,
man. Yeah,
1 minute and I'm done, you know. But that now I can play it for like an hour or so, and I'm fine, you know. So
sure.
I've built up that tolerance, and I believe it's a lot like in the earlier days, right? People would get sick playing Doom on the flat screen monitor because they'd never encountered anything that fast paced. They get motion sickness back then. But obviously nowadays you don't hear so much about that. And I think that's because people adjust. And I think it's going to be the similar thing with VR too. The more you use it, the more you're just going to adjust to those kind of things. But to answer your question, because I think I went off on a tangent, yes, I'm looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to it in the same reason I'm looking forward to graphics becoming more realistic. And that's immersion, presence, and just getting that full high fidelity experience. It just means a better VR experience all around. And I can't begin to imagine what it would be like to have your whole field of vision covered by the screen. But I can imagine, like I said, it's going to be difficult to go back once I've experienced it. That's my feeling. So that's it for this snippet. Remember, to see the full live stream, head on over to King of Nerds. There's a link in the description below. Otherwise, we meet up every week, 10 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, to talk about everything VR, so you can catch us live over on the King of Nerds channel, where he has the live stream plus a ton of other fantastic content. So anyway, that's it from me. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you next time.